You can't even pay your own rent, Amber. What have you done with your life? Dad's voice cut through the laughter like a knife. Mom joined in, smirking. You're almost 30, living like a child. Maybe if you'd married someone successful, we wouldn't be embarrassed at family dinners. The room went quiet for a moment. Then my sister Jane laughed loudly. What was coming? The dining room at my parents' house in suburban Connecticut felt smaller than I remembered. Probably because my father's voice seemed to expand and fill every corner, bouncing off the cream-colored walls and the family portraits that hung like silent witnesses to my humiliation. You can't even pay your own rent, Amber. What have you done with your life? Dad's voice cut through the laughter like a knife. Mom joined in, smirking. You're almost 30, living like a child. Maybe if you'd married someone successful, we wouldn't be embarrassed at family dinners. The room went quiet for a moment. Then my sister Jane laughed loudly. The sound of her laughter hurt worse than anything my parents had said. Jane, golden-haired and perfect, sat there with her investment banker husband Derek. Both of them looked at me like I was some kind of pathetic zoo exhibit. My brother-in-law didn't even try to hide his smug grin as he cut into his steak. I felt my cheeks burn. 28 years old, and they could still make me feel like I was 12 again, standing in the principal's office after Jane had blamed me for the broken window she'd actually caused. Some things never change, except this time, the stakes were my entire adult life. I'm working on something, I managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper. Working on what? Jane leaned forward, her diamond tennis bracelet catching the chandelier light. Another one of your little hobbies. Remember when you tried to be a photographer? Or was it a graphic designer? Oh, wait, I forgot about the bakery phase. My Aunt Linda, Mom's sister, shifted uncomfortably in her seat, but said nothing. Uncle Mike studied his wineglass with sudden, intense interest. They'd all learned long ago not to interfere when my family decided to gang up on me. Dad pushed back from the table, his chair scraping against the hardwood floor. You know what your problem is, Amber. You've never taken anything seriously. Jane graduated top of her class from Colia. She has a career, a husband, a house in Westchester. What do you have? A studio apartment in Queens that we're probably subsidizing. Mom added, dabbing at the corners of her mouth with her napkin. She didn't even look at me when she said it. The truth was more complicated than they knew, but I'd stopped trying to explain myself to them years ago. After college, I'd bounced between jobs, trying to find something that felt right. The photography thing I'd actually gotten pretty good at. It had even sold some prints at a local art fair. But when I'd shown my parents the check for $800, Dad had laughed and asked if that was supposed to be impressive. The graphic design work had been more stable freelance contracts that paid the bills, but I'd made the mistake of being honest about a slow month, and suddenly I was a failure in their eyes, someone who couldn't hold down a real job. The bakery idea had died before it even started, mostly because Jane had made such a production about how saturated the market was, how I'd just lose money, how embarrassing it would be when I inevitably failed. But what they didn't know was that for the past 2 years, I'd been working on something different, something bigger. I'd taught myself to code, spending 18 months building an app from scratch. 8 months of pure development, debugging, redesigning, and then I'd launched it 10 months ago. The timing had been terrifying, but the app had found its audience faster than I dared to hope. I have something in the works, I said again this time, forcing myself to look directly at my father. A business opportunity? Jane laughed again, that same dismissive sound. Business opportunity. Amber, you don't know the first thing about business. Actually, Jane, you don't know the first thing about me. The words came out sharper than I'd intended, but I was past the point of caring. Oh, here we go, Mom sighed dramatically. Don't get defensive, sweetheart. We're just trying to help you see reality. Reality. They wanted to talk about reality. The reality was that I'd been working my tail off for the past 18 months on something they knew nothing about. The reality was that I'd taught myself coding, spent every spare hour learning about app development and user interface design. The reality was that I'd created something genuinely useful, something people actually wanted. But I hadn't told them. I couldn't tell them because the last time I'd gotten excited about something, the last time I'd shared a dream with them, they'd torn it apart so thoroughly that I'd spent a week crying in my apartment. Just let it go. I told myself the same words I'd repeated like a mantra for years. Get through dinner, go home, forget about it. But this time felt different. Maybe it was the way Jane kept glancing at Derek, both of them sharing private jokes at my expense. Maybe it was how Mom barely touched her food, too busy listing all the ways I'd disappointed them. Or maybe it was Dad who couldn't even maintain eye contact with me, like I was too much of a failure to deserve his direct gaze. You should think about going back to school, Uncle Mike offered, clearly trying to be helpful. Get a master's degree in something practical. Mike, she barely made it through her bachelor's, Dad said. Business administration at a state school. Not exactly Harvard material like Jane. The barbs kept coming throughout the meal. Every topic somehow circled back to my inadequacies. When they talked about Jane's recent promotion, it became a commentary on my lack of ambition. When Derek mentioned their upcoming vacation to the Maldives, Mom made a pointed remark about how I probably couldn't afford a bus ticket to New Jersey. By the time dessert arrived, I'd made a decision. I excused myself to the bathroom, pulled out my phone, and opened my email. The message was still there, the one that had arrived 3 days ago. The one I'd read approximately 400 times, still not quite believing it was real. Subject acquisition, offer, Pet Plan Pro. Miss Reynolds. Following our preliminary discussions, TechCore Solutions is prepared to formalize our acquisition offer for Pet Plan Pro. We believe your application represents significant value in the pet care technology sector and would like to propose a purchase price of $2.3 million. $2.3 million for an app I built in my cramped studio apartment, hunched over my laptop at 2 in the morning, surviving on instant ramen and determination. An app that helped pet owners manage their animals' medical records, vaccination schedules, and dietary needs. Something simple, something useful. Something I created because I'd noticed a gap in the market after adopting my cat Whiskers and struggling to keep track of all his vet appointments. It had started small, just me learning Swift and Python through online tutorials and YouTube videos. The first version had been clunky, barely functional, but I kept improving it, adding features, refining the interface, fixing bugs. I'd launched it quietly 10 months ago, expecting maybe a few hundred downloads if I was lucky. 30,000 users later, with a 4.8-star rating and organic growth that had caught the attention of several tech companies. I had an acquisition offer sitting in my inbox and another one from a competitor for $1.9 million. And a third from a venture capital firm that wanted to invest $800,000 for a 40% stake if I wanted to keep building instead of selling. I'd been planning to tell them tonight. I'd even rehearsed the words in my car on the drive over. But then the ambush had started before I'd even finished my first glass of wine, and all my prepared speeches had evaporated. Now, standing in my parents' marble-tiled bathroom, staring at myself in the mirror, I felt something shift inside me. Maybe it was pride, maybe it was anger, or maybe it was just exhaustion from years of being treated like the family disappointment. I went back to the dining room. They were mid-conversation, Jane telling some elaborate story about a work triumph, while everyone hung on her every word. I sat down quietly, and nobody even acknowledged my return. So, Amber. Derek said during a lull, his tone dripping with condescension. What's this business opportunity you mentioned, selling essential oils, cryptocurrency? Please tell me it's not one of those multi-level marketing things. The table erupted in knowing laughter. Even Aunt Linda cracked a smile. Actually, I said calmly, it's a mobile application I developed. It's called Pet Plan Pro. An app. Jane's eyebrows shot up. You made an app, Amber. You don't even know how to code. I learned. YouTube tutorials don't count as knowing how to code. Dad interjected. Real programming requires years of formal education. Tell that to the 30,000 people using my application. The number hung in the air for a moment. Mom frowned. 30,000. That seems unlikely. Check the App Store if you don't believe me. I pulled out my phone, navigated to the listing, and set it on the table. 4.8 stars. Featured in Apple's Apps We Love section last month. Number 3 in the pet care category. They actually looked. I watched their faces as they scrolled through the reviews, the ratings, the screenshots. Jane's expression went from skeptical to confused to something that might have been concern. This is actually pretty professional looking, Derek admitted, sounding surprised. Thank you, I said. I took my phone back. I've spent the last year and a half building it, teaching myself iOS development, user experience design, database management. Every free hour I had went into making it better. But how does this make money? Dad asked, his tone still dismissive. Apps are free nowadays. You're not actually earning anything from this. There's a premium model. Basic features are free. Premium subscription is $4.99 monthly or $39.99 annually. About 18% of users convert to premium within the first 3 months. I could see them doing the math in their heads. Jane got there first, her face going slightly pale. She started, around $430,000 in annual recurring revenue. Yes, though the growth curve suggests it'll be closer to $600,000 by end of year. I took a sip of my water, keeping my voice steady, which is why I've received 3 acquisition offers in the past 2 weeks. Complete silence. Uncle Mike had stopped mid-chew. Mom's fork was suspended halfway to her mouth. Dad just stared at me like I'd started speaking a foreign language. Acquisition offers, Jane repeated slowly. As in, companies want to buy your app. The highest offer is $2.3 million. The lowest is $1.9 million. There's also a venture capital firm willing to invest $800,000 for equity if I want to continue developing it myself rather than selling outright. I watched the words land like bombs. Derek's smug expression had completely vanished. Jane looked like she'd been slapped. My parents seemed genuinely confused, as if the fundamental laws of the universe had suddenly rearranged themselves. That's impossible, Dad finally said. Nobody just makes an app and gets offered millions of dollars. Tell that to the guy who made Flappy Bird, or the teenager who sold his news app to Yahoo for $30 million. The tech acquisition market is robust for applications that show strong user engagement and revenue potential. You're making this up, Jane said, but her voice lacked conviction. I pulled out my phone, again opened my email, and handed it across the table to my father. Read it yourself. That's from TechCore Solutions. Their legal team sent over the preliminary term sheet yesterday. He read it. Actually read it, his eyes moving across the screen. Then he handed the phone to Mom, who read it with Jane looking over her shoulder. I watched their faces change as they processed the legal language, the dollar amounts, the signature line from TechCore's CEO. This is real, Mom whispered. Very real. I took my phone back. I've been meeting with attorneys this week to review the offers, trying to decide whether to sell now or hold out for more growth. Why didn't you tell us, Dad asked, and for the first time that evening, he actually sounded like he wanted to know the answer. When would I have told you? Between the comments about my rent situation, during the discussion about my failed life choices, maybe after Jane finished laughing about my hobbies. The bitterness in my voice surprised even me. I learned a long time ago not to share things with this family until they're already successful, because God forbid I talk about something I'm working on and have it torn apart before it even has a chance to succeed. That's not fair, Mom started. Isn't it? Remember when I wanted to start the photography business? Dad laughed in my face. He said I was wasting my time, that nobody makes money in photography anymore, that I should get a real job. I was 23 years old, and I let his words kill my dream before I even tried. I was being realistic, Dad said defensively. You were being cruel. You've always been cruel, both of you. I turned to Mom. Do you remember what you said when I told you I was learning graphic design? You said it was nice that I had a hobby, but I needed to focus on finding a husband before I got too old. I didn't mean, yes, you did. You meant every word. And Jane, you've spent our entire lives treating me like I'm some kind of embarrassment, like my existence somehow diminishes your accomplishments. I never said that, Jane protested. You didn't have to say it. It's in every look, every laugh, every snide comment. You've made it crystal clear that you're the success story and I'm the cautionary tale. Derek cleared his throat uncomfortably. Maybe we should... Stay out of this, Derek. You've contributed plenty to the entertainment tonight. I stood up, grabbing my purse. I came here thinking maybe, just maybe, I could have one family dinner without being made to feel like garbage. But you people can't help yourselves. It's like you need someone to look down on to feel better about yourselves. Amber, sit down, Dad commanded in his stern voice, the one that used to make me immediately obey when I was younger. No, I'm done. Done with the dinners. Done with the judgment. Done with all of it. I headed toward the front door. Behind me, I could hear chairs scraping as people stood up. You can't just leave, Mom called after me. We need to talk about this. Talk about what? About how you were all wrong about me. About how the daughter you've been mocking for years actually accomplished something. About how maybe, just maybe, I'm not the failure you've spent the last decade telling me I am. I stopped in the foyer, hand on the doorknob, and turned back to face them. They were all clustered in the dining room doorway, looking shell-shocked and confused. Here's what's going to happen, I said. I'm going to accept one of these acquisition offers. I'm going to pay off my student loans, buy a nice place to live, and probably take a long vacation somewhere I've always wanted to go. And I'm going to do all of this without any input, advice, or commentary from any of you. Amber, please, Dad said, and he actually sounded remorseful. Let's talk about this. We can help you negotiate, make sure you're getting a fair deal. Help me. You want to help me now. Where was the help when I was struggling to learn coding? Where was the encouragement when I was working 16-hour days to get the first version launched? Where was the family support when I needed it most? We didn't know, Jane said quietly. No, you didn't know. Because I didn't tell you. Because I learned my lesson. I learned that this family only respects success, only values achievement, and only offers support when there's something in it for them, or when the hard work is already done. That's not true, Mom said, but she couldn't meet my eyes. It's completely true. And the saddest part is that you don't even see it. You think you're being helpful with your criticisms and your reality checks. But all you've done is chip away at my confidence for years until I stopped believing in myself. I opened the door. The cool evening air felt like liberation. Wait, Dad said. At least let us celebrate with you. This is a huge accomplishment. We should do something special. Celebrate. You want to celebrate now. After spending the entire evening telling me I'm a disappointment, I laughed, but there was no humor in it. You don't get to celebrate my victories after you've mocked my struggles. That's not how this works. You're being childish, Jane said, her voice sharp. There was the sister I knew, unable to let me have the last word. Maybe I am. Or maybe I'm just done letting you people make me feel small. I've spent my whole life trying to earn your approval, trying to make you proud, trying to prove that I'm worth something. And tonight I finally have something that should make you proud. But instead of being happy for me, instead of apologizing for all the terrible things you've said, you're standing here looking confused that I won't just forgive and forget. We love you, Mom said, and she actually sounded like she meant it. Maybe you do, but love without respect isn't enough, and you don't respect me. You've never respected me. I stepped outside onto the porch. When you can figure out how to treat me like a person instead of a punchline, give me a call. Until then, lose my number. I walked to my car, ignoring the calls behind me. Got in, started the engine, and drove away from that house, from that family, from all the years of feeling inadequate and small. My hands shook the entire drive back to Queens, not from fear or regret, but from the adrenaline rush of finally speaking my truth. I'd fantasized about that moment for years, imagining what it would feel like to tell them exactly how their words had wounded me. The reality was simultaneously more satisfying and more hollow than I'd expected. When I got home, Whiskers greeted me at the door with his usual demanding meow. I scooped him up, burying my face in his orange fur, and let myself cry for the first time that night. Not sad tears exactly, more like the release of pressure that had been building for decades. My phone started ringing around 11. Mom's name flashed on the screen. I declined the call. It rang again 2 minutes later, Dad this time. Declined. Then Jane, then Derek, then Aunt Linda calling to mediate. I turned my phone on silent and tried to sleep, though my mind kept replaying the evening on an endless loop. Around 3 in the morning, I gave up on sleep and opened my laptop. I started drafting an email to my attorney, Sarah Mitchell, outlining my decision to move forward with the TechCore acquisition. Writing it out made it feel real in a way the spoken words hadn't. This was actually happening. I was actually selling my app for life-changing money. I thought about all the nights I'd sat in this exact spot debugging code until my eyes burned, surviving on coffee and the stubborn refusal to quit. The early days when the app kept crashing, when I'd almost deleted the entire project in frustration. The breakthrough moment when I'd figured out the database architecture that made everything work smoothly. The first 5-star review from a user who said my app had helped them save their dog's life by keeping track of crucial medication schedules. Every victory had been mine alone, every failure, every lesson, every small triumph, and now the payoff was mine too, untainted by their involvement or opinions. The next morning, I woke up to 17 missed calls and 32 text messages, Mom, Dad, Jane, even Derek and Aunt Linda. All variations of, we need to talk. Please call us back and let's discuss this rationally. I ignored all of them. Instead, I called my attorney and told her to move forward with the TechCore acquisition. The process took 6 weeks, during which my family's attempts to contact me became increasingly desperate. Jane showed up at my apartment twice. I didn't answer the door. Dad sent flowers with an apology card. I donated them to a nursing home. The day the acquisition finalized, I received $2.3 million in my bank account. After taxes and legal fees, I was left with a little over $1.4 million. Not exactly enough to retire on, but enough to change my life completely. I remember sitting at my kitchen table when the wire transfer notification came through, staring at my phone screen until the numbers stopped looking like numbers and became an abstract concept. Whiskers jumped onto the table, walking across my laptop keyboard and demanding attention with his paw on my hand. That grounded me, brought me back to reality. My first instinct was to call someone to share the moment. But who? My college roommate Sarah had moved to Seattle 3 years ago, and we'd drifted apart. My friend Marcus from my graphic design days would be happy for me, but he'd also probably ask for a loan within the week. The person I wanted to call, the person I would have called a year ago, was Jane. But that door was closed now, locked from both sides. So instead, I celebrated alone. I ordered Thai food from the expensive place I'd always avoided, because $16 for pad Thai had seemed excessive. I opened a bottle of wine I'd been saving for a special occasion, toasted myself in my tiny kitchen, while Whiskers judged me from his perch on the refrigerator. The loneliness of success surprised me. I'd imagined this moment would feel triumphant, vindicating. And it did partially. But there was also a hollowness, a space where family celebration should have been. They'd stolen that from me. Or maybe I'd stolen it from myself by not letting them in sooner. Hard to say which. The following week, I met with a financial advisor that Sarah Mitchell had recommended. His name was Robert Chen, and his office in Midtown Manhattan had the kind of understated luxury that screamed old money. He walked me through investment strategies, tax implications, and the importance of not making any major decisions while emotionally charged. A lot of people come into money and immediately start spending. Robert said, pulling up spreadsheets on his massive monitor. They buy cars, houses, take lavish vacations. Then 5 years later, they're wondering where it all went. I'm not planning to be stupid about it, I assured him. I don't think you're stupid at all, Miss Reynolds. Anyone who built what you built is clearly intelligent and disciplined. But money changes things in ways people don't expect. Relationships shift. People you haven't talked to in years suddenly remember you exist. He wasn't wrong about that. Within 2 weeks of the acquisition becoming public knowledge, TechCore had issued a press release announcing the purchase. I started getting messages from people I'd barely spoken to since high school. Congratulations mixed with casual mentions of business ideas they'd love to discuss, investment opportunities too good to pass up, or simply we should catch up sometime from people who had never wanted to catch up before. I ignored most of them, blocked a few of the more aggressive ones, and started to understand why wealthy people became paranoid about others' motivations. I paid off my student loans in full, bought a beautiful 2-bedroom condo in Brooklyn with actual sunlight and a view of the park. I booked a month-long trip to Japan, something I'd dreamed about since college but never thought I'd afford. I started looking into angel investing opportunities in female-founded tech startups. And through it all, I didn't tell my family a single thing. 3 months after the acquisition, I got a different kind of message from Jane. I'm sorry. You were right about everything. Can we please talk? I stared at the text for a long time. Part of me wanted to delete it to maintain the wall I'd built between us. But another part of me, the part that remembered us as kids before the competition and comparisons ruined everything, that part wanted to at least hear her out. We met at a coffee shop in Manhattan Neutral Territory. Jane looked different, somehow less polished than usual. Her hair was in a simple ponytail instead of her usual styled waves, and she wasn't wearing any makeup. The coffee shop was one of those aggressively trendy places in Chelsea, exposed brick, reclaimed wood, furniture baristas with ironic mustaches. Jane was already seated when I arrived, nursing what looked like a plain black coffee. She'd always been a caramel macchiato person, extra whip. The change felt significant somehow. I ordered a green tea. My stomach was too twisted for caffeine and sat down across from her. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. We just looked at each other, two women who shared DNA and childhood memories, but had become strangers somewhere along the way. Thank you for coming, she said as I sat down. I'm not here to forgive you, I said immediately. I just want to hear what you have to say. She nodded, wrapping her hands around her coffee cup. Derek and I are getting divorced. Whatever I'd expected her to say, it wasn't that. He cheated on me. Has been for almost a year. With his assistant. Because apparently we're living in a bad rom-com. She laughed bitterly. Turns out the perfect life I was so smug about was built on lies. Jane, I'm sorry. Don't be. I'm not telling you this to get sympathy. I'm telling you because it made me realize something. She looked up at me, her eyes red like she'd been crying. I've been so focused on looking successful, on having the right career, the right husband, the right house, that I forgot what actually matters. And I treated you terribly because you reminded me of the freedom I gave up. What are you talking about? You've always done what you wanted, Amber. Even when it was hard. Even when we all made fun of you, you kept trying new things. You took risks, you followed your interests, and I envied that so much that I turned it into mockery. She wiped at her eyes. I convinced myself that my path was the only right path, and anyone who chose differently was making a mistake. But the truth is, I'm miserable. I've been miserable for years. I hate my job. My marriage was a sham, and I spent so much energy tearing you down that I didn't notice my own life falling apart. I didn't know what to say. This vulnerable version of Jane was someone I barely recognized. Mom and Dad are the same way, she continued. They're so obsessed with conventional success that they can't see past it, and they raised us to value the wrong things. But you broke out of that. You figured out that their approval wasn't worth sacrificing your own path. It took me a long time to get there. I know, and we made it so much harder than it needed to be. She reached across the table, not quite touching my hand, but close. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't even know if we can have a real relationship after everything, but I needed you to know that you were right about all of it. And I'm sorry. Truly, deeply sorry for every cruel word, every dismissive laugh, every time I made you feel less than. We talked for 2 hours that day. She told me about the cracks in her marriage, about the pressure she felt to maintain appearances, about how exhausting it was to live up to everyone's expectations. I told her about the loneliness of building something alone, about the nights I'd almost given up, about how much her mockery had hurt, even though I'd pretended it didn't. It wasn't a complete reconciliation. Too much damage had been done for that. But it was a start, a fragile beginning of something that might eventually resemble a real sisterly relationship. As for my parents, that took longer. Dad reached out 6 months after the acquisition, asking if we could meet for dinner. Just him. No mom, no Jane, no audience. I almost said no. Almost deleted the email and continued with the wall I'd built. But something in his message caught my attention. I need to apologize without witnesses, without anyone to perform for, just you and me if you're willing. The honesty of it surprised me enough to respond. We exchanged a few emails, negotiating the terms like diplomats arranging a peace treaty, neutral location. No ambushes, no attempts to pressure me into reconciling with Mom or rebuilding the family unit. Just a conversation between father and daughter. I chose the restaurant, a quiet Italian place in his neighborhood that I knew he liked but had no memories attached to for me. Somewhere I could leave easily if things went south, somewhere he'd feel comfortable enough to be honest. The week leading up to the dinner felt surreal. I changed my outfit 4 times the day of finally settling on jeans and a nice sweater. Casual enough to show I wasn't trying too hard, put together enough to remind him I was doing well. Petty maybe, but I was still human. We met at the restaurant that evening. He looked older than I remembered, more gray in his hair, deeper lines around his eyes. "I've been a terrible father to you," he said, before I'd even ordered a drink. Not in the ways that are easy to point to, not with abuse or neglect, but in all the small ways that matter. The ways I dismissed your dreams, minimized your efforts, and made you feel like you weren't enough. Dad, let me finish. He took a deep breath. After you left that night, Jane showed me some articles about successful tech entrepreneurs, stories about people who taught themselves to code, who built million-dollar companies from nothing. And I realized that I could have been reading about my own daughter if I'd just believed in you, if I'd supported you instead of tearing you down. Why didn't you? I asked quietly. Why was it so important to make me feel like a failure? Because I was afraid. He looked down at his hands. Your mother and I, we followed the traditional path. College careers, marriage, house, kids. We did everything we were supposed to do, checked every box. But somewhere along the way, we stopped being happy. We stopped being fulfilled. And when you started doing things differently, started taking risks, trying new things, it scared me. Because it reminded me of all the chances I never took. So you tried to make me as miserable as you were. Not consciously, but yes, essentially. I wanted you to follow the safe path because the alternative was terrifying. What if you failed? What if you struggled? But I didn't realize that by protecting you from failure, I was also preventing you from succeeding. We talked for hours that night. He apologized, really apologized, taking responsibility for his actions without excuses or justifications. It didn't erase the years of hurt, but it helped. It helped to hear him acknowledge what he'd done, to see him genuinely trying to understand. Mom took even longer. She called a year after the acquisition, asking if we could talk. We had coffee, awkward and stilted. She apologized, but it felt performative, like she was saying what she thought I wanted to hear, rather than something she genuinely felt. I don't think you understand what you did wrong, I told her. You think this is about you not being supportive enough, but it's deeper than that. You made me feel worthless. You made me believe that my value as a person was tied to whether I had a husband and a traditional career. I just wanted you to be happy, she said defensively. No, you wanted me to be what you considered successful. Those are different things. We ended that conversation without resolution. Maybe someday we'd get there, but I wasn't holding my breath. 2 years after that dinner at my parents' house, I was sitting in my home office in Brooklyn working on a new app idea. This one was for mental health tracking, helping people manage their therapy appointments and mood patterns. I'd learned so much from building Pet Plan Pro, and I wanted to create something even more meaningful. My phone rang. Jane. Hey, I answered. What's up? Mom's in the hospital. Heart attack. She's stable, but they want to keep her for observation. Everything else fell away in that moment. Whatever hurt and anger I'd been carrying didn't matter as much as the sudden fear that I might lose her before we could figure things out. I met Jane and Dad at the hospital. Mom looked small in the bed, hooked up to monitors and IVs, but she was awake, and when she saw me, she started crying. I'm so sorry, she said, the words tumbling out. I've been such a fool, such a terrible mother. I almost died, and all I could think about was how I'd wasted so much time being disappointed in you when I should have been proud. Mom, no. Please let me say this while I still have the clarity. She grabbed my hand with surprising strength. You were brave enough to be yourself even when we tried to make you into someone else. You built something amazing through sheer determination and talent. And instead of celebrating you, I spent years trying to diminish your light because it made me uncomfortable. Why did it make you uncomfortable? I asked softly. Because you were everything I was too afraid to be. Creative, independent, willing to fail. I followed every rule, did everything society told me I should do, and I ended up unhappy and bitter. And rather than celebrating that you chose a different path, I resented you for it. She recovered from the heart attack, but it changed something in her. She started therapy, actually, addressing the issues that had made her so critical and judgmental. She started reading books about mindfulness and self-awareness. She asked me questions about my life, really listened to the answers instead of waiting for her turn to offer criticism. It was slow progress, but it was progress. And gradually, over months and years, we started building something that resembled a healthy family dynamic. Not perfect, never perfect, but functional in a way it hadn't been before. Jane and I became close in a way we'd never been as kids. She went back to school, got a master's in psychology, and started working as a therapist specializing in family dynamics. She said her own experiences made her better at helping others navigate complicated relationships. Dad retired and started volunteering at a community center teaching computer skills to older adults. He said my success had inspired him to think about legacy differently, about what truly mattered. He still struggled sometimes with his need for conventional markers of success, but he was trying. As for me, I sold my mental health app to a larger healthcare technology company for $4.1 million. I used part of it to start a foundation that provided coding scholarships for young women from underprivileged backgrounds. I invested the rest in other people's dreams, helping fund startups that the traditional venture capital world overlooked. But more importantly, I learned to define success on my own terms, not by my bank account or my family's approval, but by whether I was living authentically, creating things that mattered, and building relationships based on mutual respect. That dinner at my parents' house changed everything. The humiliation, the anger, the final break that forced everyone to confront uncomfortable truths. It was painful, but pain is often the catalyst for growth. And while I wouldn't want to relive it, I also wouldn't erase it because it led me here, to a life I actually want, surrounded by people who've learned to love me for who I am rather than who they wanted me to be. And every time I'm tempted to doubt myself, every time that old voice of inadequacy whispers in my ear, I remember that moment when I set my phone on the table and watched their faces change. The moment I proved them wrong, not for revenge, but for myself. The moment I stopped seeking their validation and started trusting my own worth. That's the real victory, it turns out. Not the money, not the success, but the freedom to be yourself without apology. Everything else is just bonus.